They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for anything. They were totally broke. And we could have made any deal we wanted. No more nuclear weapons. You cannot let them have a nuclear weapon.
What does Donald Trump have to say about Israel, the U.S., and Iran? Hi, welcome to this episode of Inside the Epicenter with Joel Rosenberg, a podcast of the Joshua Fund, a ministry dedicated to blessing Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus. I'm Carl Muller, Executive Director of the Joshua Fund. Today, we present Donald Trump's speech declaring his love for Israel and how he was able to stand with Israel despite the opinions of other world leaders. Let's take a listen to the former president, Donald Trump.
Good evening and welcome to Nashville, Tennessee at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. I come here because there are 4,000 Christian communicators. This is the biggest convention of Christian communicators in the world. And one of the reasons I came was to see the keynote speech, former President Donald J. Trump. Now, Trump and I know each other. I met him in the Oval Office a number of years ago. I had dinner at Mar-a-Lago and spent time with him. But he's, of course, a unique and singularly interesting figure in American politics. Certainly the most pro-Israel president the United States has ever had. Controversial? Yes. You're not going to agree. Well, it depends who you are. You may not agree with everything he says or does. I don't agree with everything he says or does. But there's no question that on pro-life issues, pro-Israel issues, he's been fantastic. And so one of the things I wanted to see was why? Why did he decide to come and speak as the keynote speaker here at the NRB convention? Yes, you've got 4,000 evangelical communicators, but, you know, Trump didn't do the debates, and he's well on his way to secure the Republican nomination. But first, I just want you to see what the mainstream media isn't going to show you. He may be the next president of the United States. How does he see America? How does he see the world? Let's let him say it in his own words.
I will stand proudly with our friend and ally, the state of Israel. We will stand proudly with Israel. In our first term, I kept my promise, recognized Israel's eternal capital. That was a big thing. Everybody said, oh, wow. You know, every president, David Friedman, every president for decades was saying during their process of getting elected, during the process, that we will name the capital, we will move to Jerusalem, we'll do all of these things. Never happened. And I understood why, because once I got in, the pressure that was put on me by other countries was extraordinary. And I've told the story when I was going to move our embassy to Jerusalem, therefore becomes the capital of Israel. I was getting calls by leaders of other countries, very powerful leaders, some leaders not so far away from Israel, frankly. And they'd say, what is it about? It's about Jerusalem, it's about the capital. And I said, this is tough. I'm doing it, so there's no reason to go through these long calls. So I said, please tell them I'll call them back. This was a Wednesday. Please tell them I'll call them back on Monday. Okay, so I called back on Monday. So on, I believe, a Thursday or whatever, I announced, we had a news conference. It was incredible. I announced that we were doing this. And it was tremendously, you know, don't forget, they said the world was going to come to an end if this happened. Well, nothing happened. Everybody waited. They said this will be the bloodiest thing that's ever happened in history, and nothing happened. And I thought that was probably going to be the result, but nothing happened. But I did it, and Israel, therefore, became the capital. And it was a big thing. And on Monday, I called back the biggest leaders in the whole world, richest leaders, biggest leaders. I said, hi, what's up? They said, I called about Israel and you're naming the embassy, putting it into Jerusalem, and it's too late, isn't it? I said, yeah, I did. I wish I spoke to you earlier. David was there, right? That was a little easier than getting into arguments. I also recognized Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. That was a big one. Probably, not that we did it for dollars, but probably worth trillions of dollars. As a real estate professional, I will tell you that was a big deal. And you know, they were negotiating that out for 62 years. Every year, planes would fly in, fly out, fly in, fly out. They'd have a meeting every year for many, many years, like over 60 years, I think. I called David Friedman into my office. I said, David, explain the Golan Heights to me, please, in 5 minutes or less. Now, this has been going on for 68 years or something. The planes would come in, they'd have these big summits, they'd leave, nothing would happen. And he did. He explained it in less than 5 minutes. And I said, let's do it. And I just did it. And it's a big deal. But the biggest thing I did, in my opinion, the biggest thing was I withdrew from the disastrous Iran nuclear deal that Israel never wanted. Now, the problem is that the Biden administration did nothing. We could have made any deal we wanted. That deal was done. Iran was broke, totally broke. They had no money because I said anybody buying oil from Iran is not doing any business in the United States, right? And China stopped. They all stopped. They were doing no business. Iran was broke. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. They had no money for anything. They were totally broke. And we could have made any deal we wanted. No more nuclear weapons. You cannot let them have a nuclear weapon. And we were all set to do it. When the election ended, and you know the result, it'll go down as a tragedy in our country, in my opinion. One of the great tragedies that everyone knows it was all rigged and screwed up. A horrible thing happened. Anytime you have mail-in voting, too, you're going to have a crooked election. Remember that. Mail-in voting. Even Jimmy Carter, with his commission, said you can't have mail-in voting. France gave it up. You know, France had an election recently, 36 million votes. Paper ballots, same-day voting, voter ID, very simple. The election ended, you had a winner, you had a loser. And, but anytime you have mail-in voting, you're going to have problems. Many countries have just given it up. It can't possibly work. But with the historic Abraham Accords, we did the Abraham Accords. It's one of the greatest things ever done for peace in the Middle East. But the Biden administration didn't take advantage of it, and they didn't take advantage of the weakness at that time of Iran. So when I got out, Iran went about selling oil at levels they've never hit before. China went back to buying. India went back to buying, France went, they all went back to buying, everybody was buying. And now Iran has $235 billion. They made it over the last 3 years, $235 billion. Iran is a very rich country right now. And what a shame. It was a great time. We could have negotiated any deal. We don't want to hurt anybody, but we just don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, because when they have a nuclear weapon, very bad things are going to happen. And they're very close to having that now. That would have been, had the election not been rigged, we would have had a deal with Iran within 1 week after that election. 1 week, they were dying to make a deal because they were hurting. And it would have been a great deal for the world. It would have been a good deal for them. I want everybody to be happy. They just can't have a nuclear weapon. So it was one of those things. But the other is that, again, Ukraine we wouldn't have been. I just looked at some reports that just came out on Ukraine. The death there and destruction is just unbelievable. And Israel would have never been attacked. All of these things, none of them would have happened. And you wouldn't have had inflation, because it was caused by the price of oil. It was caused by the price of energy. And everything went up and is out of control. Now everything is hurting. Everything is hurting. And by the way, the numbers on inflation are so massive over a 3-year period. I think the real number is probably 38%, that no matter how much you made, you're losing a lot of money. You're way behind the 8 ball. I also cut off funding for the United Nations organizations that were funneling billions of taxpayer dollars to Hamas, yet Joe Biden gave it back. Close to $1 billion. He gave them $1 billion back. I also ended, as you remember, Nord Stream 2, the Russian pipeline. And then they say, oh, I like Russia, I'm so friendly. This is the biggest thing they ever did. I ended it. Think of it. The biggest thing, the biggest deal, the most profitable deal, the greatest deal they've ever done, I ended it. It was dead. And Biden came in and he approved it right away. But he killed the Keystone pipeline. He killed our pipeline. He let Russia build their pipeline to Germany and all over Europe. And then they say, well, Trump was very friendly with Putin. Putin said, man, if you're a friend, I'd hate like hell to see you as an enemy. I'd like to ask a man who's with us tonight, and he's been with me the entire way, Ambassador David Friedman, just come up and say a few words and give us a little of that wisdom, please. Thank you.
Our verse of the day today is found in Psalms 122, verse 6. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May those who love you be secure. And our prayer request today is number 1, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, Israel, and her neighbors. And second, pray that more leaders and nations around the world would be willing to stand with Israel.
This brings back great memories, really great memories. Mr. President, I just want to say a couple of things that I think everybody here thinks is obvious, but we need to say it anyway. The first, you were the greatest friend that Israel ever had in the Oval Office. By far. By far. The second thing is that the tragedy that is now befalling the state of Israel, and it breaks my heart, and I work on this every day, and I go back and forth. I'm wearing this is to commemorate the hostages, still 130 hostages that are being held in the worst conditions. As you said, this wouldn't have happened had we still been in power, had you still been in power, had I still been working for you, for obvious reasons, because the money that now Iran is using to sell oil, the money that you cut off to the Palestinians that they now have, the money you cut off to the United Nations that they still have, all of this was the lubricant that enabled Hamas to conduct their horrible attacks, and Hezbollah too. It took a lot of money. You cut it all off, and President Biden brought it all back. And so we really wish he never left office, because we're feeling the pain right now because of that. And the last thing I'll just say is, when you move the embassy to Jerusalem, and we were there together in the Situation Room, and you got pushback from other countries, but you also got pushback from some of your own people. And I was there with you, and I remember what you said. You said, I promised I'm going to do this, and this is the right thing. And the signal that you sent to the world, not just to those people in that room, but to the whole world, is that the United States will stand with its allies, and the United States will not flinch from the threats of rogue nations. And that message, as much as it elated me and it elated everybody else in this room, that message resonated. It resonated in North Korea, and it resonated in Iran, it resonated in Russia. And when the history books are written, I believe that is one of the reasons why under your administration there were no new wars. We owe you a great gratitude that we cannot repay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you. See you later. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. You did a great job. During the debate, Hillary Clinton said, he will lead us into war. He will lead. Look at the attitude. Look at this guy. He's going to lead us into war. I said, no, my attitude will keep us out of war. We defeated ISIS 100% and then pulled everyone out. And we were, I guess they say, the first one in 72 years or something like that. I'll tell you just a quick story about Jerusalem. So a friend of mine, very rich guy in New York, has a beautiful office in a big building. And across from the elevator, he has beautiful stone. And every time I see him, he tells me about the stone, how beautiful it is. I get tired of it, actually. Look how beautiful. And he goes, it's Jerusalem stone. Jerusalem comes out of Jerusalem. He's Jewish. It comes out of Jerusalem. Look at it, it's so beautiful, isn't it? I said, yeah, for the 12th time, I said, yeah, it's beautiful. Big deal. So what happened is, when I approved the deal, and now we're all set with the deal, was done. It was done, and it went. Nobody was fighting, and there was no bloodshed, no nothing. But I said, let's build the embassy, because this embassy will never get built the way government works. So a general came in with a $2 billion form for me to sign. That was what they were going to build, and they were going to spend $2 billion to build an embassy. $2 billion to build. I think of it as a 1- or 2-story building. How do you do that? I'm in the real estate business. You don't spend that kind of money. But they were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a lousy site, bad location. We like good locations. And I said, David, go check it out, because they want me to sign. I told the general I didn't want to sign $2 billion. I didn't want to be foolish. And I said, go see if we have any buildings. You know, the United States has been around a long time. Usually we have the best site, or you could look at the post office site in Washington, D.C. Always get a post office, because that's always the first thing the federal government, they always have the best location. But I said, see if we have a good site in our inventory of sites. And lo and behold, 2 days later, David Friedman calls me back. He said, sir, we have a great site. It's much better than the site that we're talking about, and we own it. I said, does it have a building on it? Yeah, it does. And it's set back. You know, there are certain rules. They want it set back, I guess, for obvious reasons, called explosions on a sidewalk. The building is set back. It's up high. It has beautiful views. Everything is perfect. And we could probably use the frame, use the structure, save a lot of money and a lot of time. So this new building would have probably never been built. It would be built for years and years, decades probably. It would have spent billions of dollars, and they would have had nothing. I said, let's get it built. So he comes back, he sends me some pictures. I say, listen, go out and let's see what we can do. And you have to do me a favor. You're in Jerusalem. See if you can make a good deal on Jerusalem stone. Because a friend of mine tells me it's so expensive and so impossible to get. So David calls me back about 5 days later. He said, sir, I think we can do the building. I said, how much, David? About $490,000. I said, you gotta be kidding. I said, does that include Jerusalem stone? He said, the whole place is Jerusalem stone. We have so much Jerusalem stone in Jerusalem, we could get it cheaper than brick. So, right? It's a beautiful building. I don't think they ever have to do anything with it. I think it's beautiful. They'll probably someday knock it down and spend $3 billion to build a building that's terrible, but it's a beautiful building. So we not only named the site and did the capital of Israel and all of those things that all other presidents failed, many, many presidents, they all campaigned on it, and then they never had the guts. I now realize why, though, because of the pressure from other countries. But we got it built, and we got it built in about 5 months. And it opened, and it's a great fanfare, and it's such a beautiful building. It really is, and it's just about all in Jerusalem stone. They even sent me a piece of Jerusalem stone with a dedication, which I proudly have in my office.
I just wanted you to see the biggest speech that President Trump has given in this election cycle to the biggest audience of Christians. I think it's important, and I don't want to pull it all apart right this moment. I wanted you to see it and have a better sense of what he's saying, because he's not doing a lot of events like this, but he did. And please be praying for him. Pray for President Biden. I'm not taking a partisan position here. I'm just saying the Bible commands us to pray for kings and governors and all those in authority. And right now, President Biden is in power. And President Biden has said some horrible things about Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's putting a lot of pressure on us in Israel to stop the war sooner than we should, to not finish the job in Gaza, and to say, oh, let's do a two-state solution. With whom? You can't do it with Hamas. They're genocidal terrorists. With Mahmoud Abbas is in the 18th year of his 4-year term. 89% of Palestinians don't want Abbas to be the president of the Palestinians. Why? Because they believe he's too corrupt, too old. Anyway, I wanted you to see it. I wanted you to pray for the president, for the former president, and for the future. And that's something that the mainstream media doesn't always give you a chance to do, to watch someone make their case in their own words.
Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Inside the Epicenter with Joel Rosenberg about thwarting the Iran nuclear threat. Have you found this podcast valuable? Please get in touch with us. Did you know that over 9.5 million people have listened to our podcast in one format or another? Well, let us know who you are. Are you someone who's searching for Jesus? Here's where you can find him. Do you want to talk about something else on this show? Do you have a question you want Joel to answer? Send any comments or questions you might have to our email at podcast@joshuafund.net. Your feedback is incredibly valuable to us as we develop this podcast. And as always, you can check out our show notes for anything you heard on the podcast that you'd like more information on. For Joel Rosenberg and the Joshua Fund Ministry team, I'm Carl Muller, Executive Director of the Joshua Fund. Thanks for listening to this episode of Inside the Epicenter with Joel Rosenberg.
I'm Joel Rosenberg. On your left, you'll find some videos we've chosen specifically for you. We look forward to partnering with you to bless Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus.